The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the endless ribbon of highway. Dust devils swirled in the distance, kicking up grit that stung the eyes of anyone foolish enough to linger. But for young Mia, huddled by the roadside with her makeshift bracelet tray balanced on her knees, the world had narrowed to a single, desperate plea. She was 12, her dark hair tangled from hours under the relentless sky, her simple sundress smeared with the red earth of the desert. In her small hands she clutched a cardboard sign scrawled in shaky marker, "Help me find home. Mom's gone. Please." The bracelets, cheap beads and strings she'd woven herself, were her cover. A way to look harmless to passing cars that slowed but never stopped. But the truth etched deeper lines on her face than her age should allow. 3 days alone, scavenging from vending machines and hiding from the night, after her mother's car had veered off into a ravine during a storm. No one had come, no sirens, just silence and the growing ache in her belly. If you're watching this and feeling that pull in your chest, the kind that reminds you why stories like this matter, hit that subscribe button now. These tales of quiet heroes and unbreakable bonds are here to light up your day, one chapter at a time. Tears carved clean tracks through the dust on Mia's cheeks as another truck rumbled past, its driver glancing once before accelerating away. She waved her tray anyway, the beads rattling like distant thunder, a futile rhythm against the isolation. The highway was a lifeline for travelers, but for her, it mocked her with its indifference. Memories flickered, her mom's laughter in their tiny apartment, the promise whispered during bedtime stories, "I'll always keep you safe, kiddo." Now, that promise lay shattered somewhere in the twisted metal below the cliffs, and Mia's world had unraveled into this. A girl too small for the vastness around her, her voice lost to the wind. Miles back, in the heart of the Iron Oath compound, a sprawling garage ringed by chain link and weathered Harleys, Ethan Forge Harlan nursed a lukewarm coffee, staring at the faded tattoo on his forearm. It was a simple iron ring, inked during his days in the service, a vow among brothers, "We ride for the forgotten." Ethan was 42, broad-shouldered and scarred from a lifetime of choices that had left him hollow. The wars overseas had taken his best friend, and the bottle had nearly claimed him after. But the club, the Iron Oath, had pulled him back, a family forged in chrome and loyalty. He led them now, not with shouts, but with the steady grip of a man who'd learned that promises were the only currency that mattered. That morning, a call had come from an old contact. Whispers of trouble on the roads, kids vanishing into the shadows of small-town neglect. Ethan had dismissed it at first, but the unease lingered like oil in his veins. The convoy thundered to life around noon, 50 bikes growling in unison as they peeled out from the compound gates. Ethan rode point on his blacked-out Road King, the wind whipping his grey-streaked beard, the scent of hot rubber and exhaust filling his lungs. They were headed north, chasing leads on a smuggling ring preying on runaways. Nothing personal, just the code, loyalty to the lost. But as the miles blurred, Ethan's mind wandered to his own ghosts. The letter from his estranged sister, unopened for years, tucked in his saddlebag. A promise he'd buried, one he'd sworn to honor when the time came. The road had a way of dredging them up, demanding payment. It was just past 3 when they crested the rise, overlooking that forsaken stretch of Route 17. The pack was a rolling storm, leather vests emblazoned with the Oath's emblem, engines roaring like a declaration. Mia didn't hear them at first, her head bowed over her tray, whispering to herself for courage. Then the ground trembled. She looked up, eyes widening at the horizon, a wall of chrome and fury bearing down. Panic seized her. Were they the bad ones? The ones her mum had warned about in stories of the road? But Ethan spotted her first. That tiny figure dwarfed by the sign, the tray a pathetic shield. He signaled with a gloved fist, and the convoy slowed, bikes banking in a synchronized arc that kicked up gravel like fireworks. They pulled over in a thunderous halt, a semicircle of steel horses forming a barrier against the world. Engines cut off one by one, leaving only the tick of cooling metal and the hush of the wind. Ethan dismounted first, his boots crunching on the shoulder as he approached slow, hands visible, no threat. The others, veterans like Jax, the wiry medic with burn scars from a fire he'd pulled 3 souls from. Lena, the only woman in the core crew, her eyes sharp from years, nursing the broken, fanned out but held back watchful. Mia froze, clutching her sign like a talisman, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Hey, little one," Ethan said, his voice gravelly but soft, crouching to her level. The sun caught the lines on his face, etching them deeper. "That sign of yours, it's got our attention. What's your story?" He glanced at the bracelets, the careful weave speaking of small hands fighting boredom in fear. Mia's lip trembled, the words spilling out in a rush. The storm, the crash, the endless walking. No phone, no money, just the road, and the hope that someone would see. Ethan's jaw tightened, the old fire igniting in his chest. He'd seen too many like her, discarded by a system that promised protection but delivered silence. The club had a code. You don't leave the vulnerable behind. He radioed back to the pack, his voice steady. "We've got a rider down. Real small one. We're bringing her in." Murmurs rippled through the crew, nods of agreement. Jax knelt beside him, offering a water bottle from his kit, while Lena scanned the horizon for threats. As Mia accepted the water, her small hand brushing Ethan's calloused one, something shifted in the air, a spark of connection amid the dust. This wasn't just a stop. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Ethan felt the weight of his own forgotten vow stir, the one to his sister, protect the family, blood or chosen. For Mia, it was a lifeline tossed into the abyss. The bikers, these outcasts bound by honor, had pulled over not for glory, but for the quiet justice of keeping a promise alive. And as the convoy reformed around her, engines firing up with renewed purpose, the road ahead whispered of battles yet to come, against shadows that preyed on the innocent and the corruption that let them thrive. By dusk, they were rolling toward the nearest safe haven. Mia perched behind Ethan on his bike, her tray secured in a saddlebag, the sign folded carefully beside it. The desert stretched endless, but for the first time in days, she wasn't alone. The Iron Oath rode as one, their leathers cutting through the twilight, guardians of the overlooked. Ethan's mind raced ahead, calls to make, truths to unearth about that crash. But in that moment, with the stars pricking the sky, he knew this ride would forge them all anew, binding a lost girl to a brotherhood and awakening promises long dormant in the heart of the road. The twilight bled into night as the Iron Oath convoy carved through the darkening desert, their headlights slicing the void like accusatory beams. Mia clung to Ethan's waist, her small frame pressed against the leather of his vest, the rumble of the Road King vibrating through her bones. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the sharp tang of sagebrush and cooling earth, a far cry from the stifling heat of the day. She'd never ridden like this, perched on a machine that felt alive, fierce, protective. Behind them, the pack stretched out in formation, Jax on his customized softail, Lena flanking the rear on her sleek Dyna, their silhouettes merging with the stars emerging overhead. It was a sight that could humble the indifferent sky. Outlaws turned shepherds, bound by an unspoken oath to shield what the world had cast aside. Ethan's mind churned beneath his helmet, the road's hypnotic rhythm pulling at threads he'd long tried to sever. Mia's story gnawed at him, the storm, the crash, the absence of any rescue. It echoed too closely his own buried scars. The night in a distant war zone, when he'd promised his squad brother Tommy to look after his family if things went south. Tommy hadn't made it back. And Ethan's attempt to honor that vow had ended in a fallout with his sister, who blamed him for dragging their lives into the club's shadow. The letter in his saddlebag burned like an unhealed wound, its words a reminder that promises, once given, demanded reckoning. He glanced back briefly, catching Mia's wide eyes reflecting the taillights. "You holding on, kid," he called over the engine's growl. She nodded, her voice a whisper lost to the rush. "It feels like flying, but what if they come looking? The ones who didn't stop before?" Her words hung, laced with the fear of shadows that preyed on the solitary. Ethan felt the weight of it, the moral fracture in a land where highways promised freedom but delivered isolation. The Iron Oath wasn't just a club, it was a bulwark against that neglect, forged from men and women who'd stared down corruption in uniforms and badges alike. They'd tangled with sheriffs on the take, systems that buried truths under red tape. This girl, with her woven bracelets and fragile sign, was a call to arms, a spark igniting the embers of their code. As the miles ticked by, the convoy veered toward Eldridge Hollow, a dusty outpost town clinging to the edge of the Badlands. It was neutral ground, home to a no-questions-asked diner run by an old ally, Marcus, a former vet who'd traded his dog tags for a grill and a vow of silence. The neon sign flickered into view around 9, buzzing like a weary heartbeat. Hollow's rest. Eat, sleep, ride on. Ethan signaled the pull-off, and the bikes cascaded into the lot, their arrival shaking loose pebbles from the eaves. Engines silenced, the air filled with the pop of cooling pipes and the faint sizzle of frying oil from inside. Mia dismounted on unsteady legs, Jack steadying her with a gentle hand, his burn-scarred fingers careful as he checked her for signs of dehydration. Inside, the diner glowed warm against the chill seeping in from the desert. Booths lined the walls, scarred vinyl whispering stories of transients and troubles. Marcus, a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard, looked up from behind the counter, his eyes narrowing then softening at the sight of the crew. "Forge," he rumbled, sliding a pot of coffee their way without a word. "And who's the new rider?" Mia hovered near Ethan, her bracelet tray retrieved and clutched like an anchor, the beads glinting under the fluorescent hum. Ethan guided her to a corner booth, the vinyl creaking under his weight. "Name's Mia. Been walking that road alone since a wreck took her mom. We're piecing it together." He kept his voice low, scanning the room, empty save for a lone trucker nursing a soda at the far end. Lena slid in opposite, unpacking a first aid kit, while Jax fetched plates of burgers and fries, the savory steam rising like a balm. Mia ate tentatively at first, then with the hunger of days denied, her story unfolding in halting bursts between bites. The ravine, she said, was off a forgotten turnout, marked by a weathered cross someone had left years ago for another lost soul. No flares, no calls for help that she remembered, just the rain hammering down, her mom yelling for her to run. Marcus leaned on the counter, arms crossed, his face a map of quiet outrage. "Sounds like that stretch they call Devil's Drop. Cops out here are stretched thin. Budget cuts, they say. But I've heard whispers. Folks vanishing, reports filed and forgotten." His words stirred the air, an undercurrent of institutional rot that Ethan knew all too well. The Iron Oath had ridden against it before, a ring of locals turning blind eyes to smugglers ferrying the desperate across borders, pocketing silence. Ethan's fist clenched around his mug, the ceramic warm against his palm. This wasn't random. Mia's isolation reeked of deliberate oversight. He pulled out his burner phone, dialing a contact in the network, a retired dispatcher with access to old logs. "Check for incidents on Route 17 last storm. Kid's mom didn't make it to any reports." As the call connected, tension coiled in the booth. Mia's eyes darted to the window where the night pressed against the glass, shadows playing tricks. Lena noticed, draping an arm around her shoulders. "We've got you now, sweetheart. That's what family does, steps in when the world's looking the other way." Her voice carried the steel of someone who'd mended more than bodies. Lena had been a nurse in the thick of urban decay, pulling kids from the fringes until the system pushed her out. Now she rode with the oath, her loyalty a fierce counter to the cynicism that had nearly broken her. The phone crackled back, faint records of a slide-off, no follow-up, no search declared. "Paper trail ends cold," the voice said. Ethan's jaw set, the pieces aligning into something uglier, neglect bordering on complicity. He pocketed the phone, meeting the crew's gazes. Jax nodded, his medic's kit already mentally stocked for whatever lay ahead. "We ride back at dawn, scout that ravine. Can't leave her hanging on ghosts." Mia looked up, her face pale but resolute, the fear edging toward trust. In that dingy diner, amid the clink of silverware and the low murmur of distant semis, a new bond solidified, not of blood, but of chosen honor. Ethan felt his own promise stir deeper, the one to Tommy, to his sister: protect the fragile, stand against the void. Outside, the bikes waited like sentinel beasts, dew kissing their frames under the moon. As the crew settled into the motel's sparse rooms, Marcus comping the stay, Ethan lingered on the porch, staring at the endless black. Mia's sign, unfolded on the railing, caught the faint light. "Help me find home." It was more than words. It was a vow echoed in his ink, in the oath's roar. Tomorrow they'd chase the truth, facing whatever shadows guarded the ravine, corrupt eyes or worse. But for now, in the hush of Eldridge Hollow, the road had given them purpose, weaving a lost girl into the fabric of their unbreakable circle. Redemption wasn't loud. It was this, the quiet ride toward justice, 1 mile at a time. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. Dawn broke over Eldridge Hollow like a reluctant confession, the first rays piercing the motel's thin curtains and painting the room in hues of faded gold. Ethan stirred in the narrow bed, the springs groaning under his weight as he swung his boots to the floor. Sleep had been a shallow thing, haunted by fragments of Mia's tale, the rain-slicked road, the scream of metal yielding to stone. He rubbed the stubble on his jaw, the tattoo on his forearm catching the light, that iron ring, a silent sentinel reminding him of vows etched in blood and fire. Outside, the desert woke with a hush, coyotes scattering into the scrub as the air cooled from night's embrace. The scent of damp sage mingled with the faint, oily tang of idling engines. The crew was already stirring, their low voices carrying through the thin walls like a pre-dawn ritual. Mia slept in the room next door, under Lena's watchful eye, her small form curled beneath a borrowed blanket that smelled of laundry soap and road dust. The bracelets from her tray lay scattered on the nightstand, beads glinting like captured stars, simple talismans against the unknown. Lena sat by the window, nursing a thermos of black coffee, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She'd seen too many nights like this in her nursing days. Kids adrift in systems that chewed them up and spat out excuses. Joining the Iron Oath had been her redemption, a way to stitch wounds the world ignored. "She's tougher than she looks," Lena murmured to herself, as Mia shifted in her sleep, whispering fragments of dreams that sounded like pleas. By the time Ethan stepped onto the gravel lot, the convoy was assembling, 50 bikes in a loose phalanx, chrome gleaming under the rising sun. Jax was last to gear up, his medic bag slung across his softdale like an extension of his scarred arms. The burns from that warehouse blaze years back had twisted his skin, but not his resolve. He'd pulled survivors from infernos, vowing never to let fire or neglect claim another without a fight. Marcus emerged from the diner, wiping his hands on a rag, a thermos of provisions tucked under his arm. "Ravine's a snake pit this time of year," he warned, his voice gravel from a lifetime of swallowed stories. "Loose rocks, drop-offs, And if those whispers are true, eyes watching from the ridges. Ethan nodded, clapping the old vet on the shoulder. The code was clear. Scout, secure, uncover. No badges needed when honor led the way. Mia emerged then, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her sundress swapped for an oversized oath hoodie that drowned her frame. She clutched her sign, folded but not forgotten, and the tray of bracelets like a shield. "You don't have to go back there," Ethan said, kneeling to meet her gaze, the morning chill nipping at their skin. But her chin lifted, a spark of the road's grit in her eyes. "Mum's there, somewhere. I need to know." The words hung between them, a bridge across the chasm of loss. Ethan felt his own ghosts stir, the unopened letter from his sister, promising amends he'd delayed too long. This ride wasn't just for Mia, it was a mirror, forcing him to face the promises he'd let rust. The engines roared to life at first light, a symphony of thunder that shook the motel's windows and scattered birds from the telegraph wires. Ethan hoisted Mia onto his Road King, her arms wrapping tight around his midsection, the weight of her trust a steady anchor. The pack surged forward, tires biting into the dirt as they left Eldridge Hollow behind, the diner's neon fading like a memory. Route 17 unfolded ahead, a scarred vein through the Badlands, flanked by jagged cliffs that clawed at the sky. The air whipped past, carrying the dry bite of dust and the metallic hint of impending rain, echoes of the storm that had started it all. Ethan led the formation, his mind mapping the route from Mia's description, the forgotten turnout, the cross weathered by forgotten griefs. They reached Devil's Drop by mid-morning, the ravine yawning like a wound in the earth, its depth shrouded in shadow even under the climbing sun. The convoy halted at the edge, bikes forming a vigilant ring as engines cut to silence. The wind howled through the crevices, tugging at jackets and stirring pebbles that skittered like warnings. Ethan dismounted, helping Mia down, her face paling at the sight. "That's it," she whispered, pointing to a jagged scar in the roadside barrier, twisted metal long since rusted, as if the crash had been erased by time's indifferent hand. Jax unpacked ropes and gear, his movements precise, while Lena scanned the perimeter with binoculars, her nurse's instincts alert for any sign of lingering peril. They descended in pairs, boots crunching over loose shale that echoed like brittle bones. The air grew cooler, thicker, with the musty scent of damp rock and overgrown thorns. Mia stayed topside with Lena, her small hands twisting a bracelet as she watched Ethan and Jax vanish into the gloom. Deeper in, the ravine revealed its secrets piecemeal, skid marks faded to ghosts, a shattered headlight winking from the underbrush, shards of glass catching the filtered light like tears. No body, no wreckage pulled, just abandonment, the kind that spoke of deliberate oversight. Ethan's boot nudged a scrap of fabric, blue and torn, matching Mia's memory of her mum's scarf. His gut twisted. This wasn't accident's chaos. It reeked of cover-up. The sort the oath had unraveled before, local enforcers pocketing favors from runners who trafficked in silence. A glint lower down caught Jax's eye. A phone, cracked but intact, wedged in the roots of a gnarled juniper. He retrieved it carefully, powering it on with a spare battery from his kit. The screen flickered to life, messages frozen in time, last one from an unknown number. "Stay off the road! They're watching!" Ethan's blood ran cold. This was no storm's whim. Corruption's fingers reached here, twisting justice into knots. As they climbed back, hauling the evidence in a saddlebag, the crew's faces hardened into resolve. Mia's eyes met Ethan's, questions burning unspoken. "We'll find out," he promised, the word heavy as iron. Up top, the pack reformed, but the air crackled with new purpose, not just rescue, but reckoning. By noon they were rolling out, the ravine's shadow lingering like a stain. Marcus's words echoed, eyes on the ridges. Ethan scanned the bluffs, spotting a distant flicker. Binoculars. A tail. The road ahead twisted toward confrontation, the oath's loyalty a shield against the gathering storm. Mia leaned into him, her voice cutting through the wind. "Thank you for seeing me." In that moment, amid the roar and the dust, Ethan felt the weight lift slightly, the promise to Tommy, to his sister, stirring toward fulfillment. This family, chosen in leather and chrome, would ride through the fire, unearthing truths buried deep, one honorable mile at a time. The desert watched, impartial. As their engines faded into the haze, guardians awakened to a battle for the soul of the forgotten. The sun climbed mercilessly toward its zenith, turning the Badlands into a furnace of shimmering heat waves that distorted the horizon like a fever dream. The Iron Oath convoy thundered onward from Devil's Drop, engines growling in defiance of the oppressive silence that had settled after the ravine's grim revelations. Ethan gripped the handlebars of his Road King tighter, the leather of his gloves creaking against the vibration, while Mia's arms stayed locked around his waist, her warmth a small counter to the chill of what they'd unearthed. The cracked phone in his saddlebag felt like a live wire, its frozen message, "Stay off the road, they're watching," echoing in his mind like a warning shot. Behind them, the pack maintained formation, Jax and Lena trading vigilant glances over the roar, their bikes slicing through the dust devils that danced like mocking spirits. Ethan's thoughts raced faster than the wind whipping past, pulling him back to the shadows of his past. The tattoo on his forearm burned under the sun's glare, that iron ring inked in a bunker overseas, where promises were the only light in the dark. Tommy's face flickered in his memory, grinning through the grit of deployment, clapping Ethan's shoulder before the ambush that claimed him. "Look after mine if I don't make it, Forge," he'd said, voice steady amid the chaos. Ethan had tried. Riding to his sister's door after the funeral, offering the club's protection against the debts Tommy's death had left. But she turned him away, eyes hollow with grief turned to blame. "Your world's poison, Ethan. Stay away from my boy." The letter in his bag was her last outreach, years cold, begging reconciliation for her son's sake, a nephew Ethan had never met. A promise gathering dust like the road's forgotten miles. Mia's trust now mirrored that ache, forcing him to confront the rust on his own vows. A low rumble from the rear snapped him alert. Not the Oath's engines, but something closing in, a black SUV emerging from the bluffs, like a predator scenting blood. It hung back at first, a shadow on the periphery, but Jax's voice crackled over the radio. "Tail at 3 o'clock, Forge. Unmarked plates, tinted glass. Not locals." Ethan's jaw clenched, the metallic tang of adrenaline flooding his mouth. This wasn't coincidence. The ravine's neglect screamed interference, and now eyes followed. He signaled a split, the convoy fracturing into two flanks, Lena veering left toward a cluster of boulders for cover, Jax right to draw fire if needed. Mia tensed against him, her breath quickening. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" she whispered, the wind stealing the edges of her fear. The SUV accelerated, engine snarling as it bridged the gap, its bulk kicking up a rooster tail of gravel that pelted the rear bikes like hail. Ethan pushed the Road King harder, the needle climbing, the desert blurring into streaks of ochre and sage. The air thickened with tension, the sun's heat pressing down like judgment. Memories surged, a similar chase years back, when the Oath had exposed a sheriff's cut in a smuggling op, badges bought with blood money. They'd ridden through ambushes then, loyalty their only armor, emerging scarred but unbroken. This felt personal. The phone's message a thread, tying Mia's loss to a web of silence. Perhaps runners who'd staged the crash to silence a witness, or worse, enforcers burying tracks for higher bids. The chase crested a rise, the SUV lunging closer, its horn blaring a guttural warning. Ethan spotted a narrow canyon fork ahead, a gamble etched in the land's unforgiving lines, tight walls that could box them in or shake a pursuer. "Hold on, kid," he growled, banking sharp into the left branch, the pack mirroring in a thunderous pivot. Tires screeched on loose rock, sparks flying as metal kissed stone. The SUV followed, too bulky, its fender scraping the canyon wall with a shriek that echoed like rage. Jax peeled off behind, his soft tail darting like a wasp, forcing the vehicle to swerve. A shot rang out, muffled from a sidearm, pinging off a boulder and sending chips of stone flying. Mia buried her face in Ethan's back, her small body trembling, but her grip held firm, a silent vow of her own. Deeper in, the canyon narrowed, shadows cooling the air to a damp hush, broken only by the labored growl of engines. Ethan killed the throttle at a blind bend, dismounting in a fluid motion and pulling Mia behind a jutting ledge. The oath fanned out, bikes forming a barricade of chrome and resolve, Jax already unpacking his kit, not for wounds yet, but for the smoke grenades that could blind a tail. Lena crouched nearby, her diner's engine ticking as she covered the approach, her voice a low anchor. We've danced this before. They want the girl, or what she saw. But we don't yield. The SUV rounded the corner too fast, brakes locking in a plume of dust, slewing sideways. Two figures bailed out, hard men in plain clothes, faces shadowed under ball caps, hands reaching for holsters. Ethan stepped forward, hands raised but stance unyielding, the sun casting his shadow long across the gravel. End of the line, boys. Whatever game's on, the kid's not part of it. The lead man sneered, his drawl thick with false authority. Club business stays off our roads. Hand her over and we forget this detour. But Ethan's eyes locked on the glint of a badge clipped inside the man's jacket. Local, crooked, the kind that traded justice for envelopes. The air crackled with standoff, the canyon walls amplifying breaths into thunder. Jax flanked left, Lena right, the pack a wall of leather and scarred honor. Mia peeked from cover, her sign clutched like a flag, whispering, "Don't let them take me back to nothing." The tension snapped when the second man lunged, but Ethan was faster. Years of road-honed reflexes dropping him with a precise tackle, the impact jarring dust into the air. Fists flew in a blur, grunts echoing off stone, while Jax subdued the leader with a medic's nerve hold. Efficient and unyielding. No guns drawn, no blood spilled, just restraint, the oath's way. Subdue the corrupt without becoming it. As the men slumped, zip-tied with saddle straps, Ethan rifled their pockets, a radio crackling with dispatch codes, confirming the cover-up. "Devil's Drop logged as clear," a voice spat. "No traces left." Mia's face hardened, the pieces clicking. Her mum's warning, the crash not fate but foul play, silenced by those sworn to protect. By the time the dust settled, the canyon felt smaller. Charged with the weight of unearthed truth, Ethan radioed markers for a tow on the SUV, the old vet's network ensuring these two vanished into questions, not cells that could spit them back out. The pack reformed, engines firing with a renewed roar that shook the walls, carrying them out into the blinding light. Mia rode taller now, her fear edged with fire, the bracelets in her lap a reminder of resilience. Ethan felt the shift deep, a step toward his own redemption, the letter's promise no longer buried. This chase had bound them tighter, family chosen in the crucible of pursuit, standing against the rot that preyed on the vulnerable. As the canyon faded behind, the road stretched toward hidden strongholds, whispers of a larger ring pulling them onward. The oath rode as one, guardians of silenced voices, their loyalty a beacon in the desert's vast indifference. Ethan's heart steadied, the iron ring on his skin alive with purpose, promises kept, one confrontation at a time, forging justice from the ashes of neglect. If this chapter stirred something in you, the fire of standing firm against the shadows, give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Your support keeps these stories riding strong. The afternoon sun dipped toward the jagged teeth of the western horizon, painting the Badlands in strokes of fiery orange and bruised purple, as if the desert itself were bleeding out the day's fury. The Iron Oath convoy pressed on from the canyon's shadow, engines humming a steady dirge that masked the undercurrent of unease rippling through the pack. Ethan led the charge on his Road King, Mia's presence a quiet weight against his back, her fingers now laced with a newfound steadiness rather than fear. The wind carried the acrid bite of scorched earth and distant rain, whipping through the formation like a cleansing breath. Behind them, Jax and Lena rode flank, their bikes cutting clean lines through the settling dust, while the rest of the crew scanned the bluffs, eyes sharp for any flicker of pursuit. The subdued men from the SUV were miles back now, trussed and handed off to Marcus's shadowy contacts, their radios silenced, but the truths they'd spilled echoing in Ethan's ears. A network of locals and runners, burying wrecks and whispers for a cut of the Shadow's profits. Ethan's grip tightened on the throttle, the vibration traveling up his arms like a pulse of unresolved tension. The cracked phone from the ravine weighed heavy in his vest pocket. Its screen dark, but its message alive. They're watching. It wasn't just Mia's mom. Fragments from the men's interrogation painted a grim mosaic. Families lured off the grid, crashes staged as accidents, reports vanishing into a bureaucratic black hole greased by small-town greed. The Iron Oath had brushed against this rot before. Sheriffs turning blind eyes to traffickers who preyed on the desperate, pocketing silence while the vulnerable paid the price. But this felt deeper, a vein of corruption snaking toward bigger players, perhaps state lines or worse. Ethan's mind drifted to his own fractures. The letter from his sister, its edges worn from years in the saddlebag, pleading for him to meet her boy, to honor Tommy's memory without dragging them into the club's orbit. "You're all we have left," she'd written, the words a hook in his gut. Mia's rescue was cracking that shell, forcing him to weigh the cost of isolation against the pull of chosen kin. As the sun kissed the horizon, the convoy veered off Route 17 onto a rutted side trail, gravel crunching under tires like brittle secrets giving way. The path wound through a labyrinth of canyons, hidden from prying eyes by sheer walls etched with ancient petroglyphs, faded warriors standing sentinel, much like the Oath themselves. They emerged at a forgotten airstrip, its cracked tarmac overgrown with stubborn weeds, ringed by rusted hangars that sagged like weary guardians. This was Blackwing Haven, a bolt hole pieced together by old allies, ex-vets and road-weary souls who'd traded badges for anonymity after seeing too much. The air here hung thick with the scent of creosote and engine grease, a sanctuary where engines could cool and truths could breathe without the law's shadow looming. Ethan killed the Road King first, the pack fanning out in a disciplined hush as boots hit the ground. Mia slid down, her legs wobbling from the ride, but she stood tall, clutching a bracelet she'd woven during the miles. A simple loop of blue beads matching the scarf scrap from the ravine. Jax dismounted nearby, slinging his medic bag over a shoulder scarred from flames long extinguished, his eyes already assessing the group's fatigue. Lena pulled up beside him, her dyna purring to a stop, and together they guided Mia toward the main hangar, its doors yawning open like an invitation to confession. Inside, the space glowed under strings of bare bulbs, workbenches cluttered with tools and maps pinned to walls, yellowed by time. At the center stood Riley, the Haven's keeper, a lean woman in her 50s, her silver-streaked hair tied back, hands stained with oil from tinkering on a salvaged chopper. She'd been a dispatcher once, pulling strings in the system until it snapped back, leaving her with a limp and a vow to aid the overlooked. "Forge," Riley greeted, her voice a low rasp honed by years of coded calls, wiping her palms on a rag as she eyed the crew. "Heard you stirred the hornet's nest, that tail you shook," words spreading. She nodded to Mia, softening. "And this one's the spark?" Ethan briefed her in clipped tones, Laying out the phone, the message, the men's confessions. A ring called the Veil, locals in bed with out-of-state operators, staging disappearances to feed a pipeline of silenced lives, runaways, witnesses, anyone crossing their paths. Riley's face darkened, pulling a battered laptop from a shelf, its screen flickering to life with encrypted logs. "I've got scraps," she said, fingers flying over keys. "Devils drops a drop point, crashes logged, then scrubbed. Your girl's mom. She called it in, twice, before the line went dead. Warning about a convoy that night, lights out, no plates." Mia's breath caught, her small frame tensing as the pieces locked into place. She stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor. "She said we were going somewhere safe, away from the watchers." The hangar fell quiet, the hum of a distant generator underscoring the weight. Ethan felt it like a punch, the moral quagmire of a world where protection twisted into predation. The Veil wasn't just crooks. They wore the guise of authority, eroding trust mile by mile. Jax leaned against a workbench, his burn scars pulling tight as he clenched a fist. "We've ridden against echoes of this before. But hitting the heart means going deep, exposing the badges without becoming the monsters." Lena nodded, her nurse's empathy flaring into resolve. "We owe her more than shelter. Truth's the only bandage that sticks." As night cloaked the airstrip, the crew gathered around a makeshift fire pit outside, flames crackling against the chill that seeped from the canyons. Sparks danced upward, mirroring the stars, pricking the vast black, while Riley shared provisions, stew steaming with chunks of venison, bread warm from a solar oven. Mia sat close to Ethan, twisting her bracelet, the beads clicking like a metronome of budding courage. Conversations wove through the group, tales of past rides, losses turned to lessons, the unyielding thread of loyalty binding them. Ethan pulled the letter from his saddlebag at last, the paper crinkling under his fingers. In the firelight he read it silently, his sister's words blurring with smoke. A grandson needing an uncle, a family fractured, but not beyond mending. Mia noticed, her hand brushing his arm. "Promises are hard to keep alone," she said softly, echoing the wisdom of her own shattered world. Riley's laptop pinged then, a lead, faint but real, a Veil meet in 2 days, a derelict warehouse on the edge of forgotten territory. The plan formed in murmurs: infiltrate, document, dismantle without a shot fired if possible. Ethan's resolve hardened, the iron ring on his skin a vow renewed, not just for Mia, but for the ghosts he'd carried too long. This haven, this circle of chosen souls, was the counter to corruption's chill, warmth forged in fire, loyalty that outlasted the road's deceptions. As embers glowed low, the pack settled into watches, bikes silhouetted like faithful hounds. Mia drifted to sleep under Lena's blanket, her tray of bracelets safe nearby, symbols of a resilience that mirrored their own. The night deepened, the desert's hush broken only by the occasional howl of wind through the hangars. Ethan stood watch, staring into the flames, the weight of tomorrow's ride settling like dew. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this, the quiet stand against the void, weaving broken threads into an unbreakable chain. The oath would roll out at dawn toward the heart of the shadows, guardians of the unseen, their honor a light piercing the gathering dark. The first light of dawn filtered through the canyon walls like a hesitant promise, casting elongated shadows across the cracked tarmac of Blackwing Haven. Ethan rose before the others, the chill air nipping at his skin as he checked his road king, fingers tracing the familiar curves of chrome dulled by desert patina. The scent of cooling embers from the fire pit lingered, mingling with the sharp tang of dew-kissed sagebrush, a brief interlude before the road demanded its toll. Inside the hangar, Mia stirred under her blanket, her eyes fluttering open to the soft glow of Riley's lantern. The bracelets on the nightstand caught the light, beads shimmering like fragments of resolved stars. She'd woven a new one overnight, a loop of black and silver for Ethan, her small hands a testament to the quiet strength blooming amid the chaos. The crew assembled in hushed efficiency, packs secured and engines primed with the low cough of ignition. Jack slung his medic bag, the weight a familiar companion, his scarred arms flexing as he shared a nod with Lena, whose sharp gaze already mapped escape routes in her mind. Riley handed out encrypted radios, her oil-stained fingers steady. Warehouse is a ghost shell. Old mill on the river bend. Vales meeting at noon. Get in quiet. Get the proof. Get out. Her words carried the rasp of experience, a former insider who'd traded complicity for conscience. Mia approached Ethan, holding out the bracelet. "For luck," she said, her voice threading determination through the morning hush. He fastened it to his wrist, the beads cool against his tattooed skin beside the iron ring, a merging of old vows and new. The convoy rolled out at sunrise, a serpent of steel uncoiling from the airstrip, tires humming over rutted earth that gave way to smoother blacktop. The Badlands unfolded in waves of rust-red rock and sparse green, the sun climbing to bake the air with the dry mineral bite of sun-baked stone. Ethan rode point, Mia's arms secure around him, her presence a steady rhythm against the wind's relentless push. The miles blurred, carrying them toward the derelict warehouse on the river's edge. A hulking relic of forgotten industry, its corrugated walls sagging under vines and time. Whispers from the captured men's radios had pinpointed it. The Vale's hub, where deals were sealed in shadows, silencing voices like Mia's mom with fabricated fates. They arrived under the midday glare, the pack dispersing into the scrub like ghosts, bikes concealed behind a ridge of boulders that overlooked the site. The river murmured below, its muddy flow sluggish and secretive, carrying the faint rot of stagnant pools. Ethan, Jax and Lena crept forward on foot, boots silent over cracked concrete, while Riley monitored from a vantage with her laptop, feeding intel through earpieces. Inside, the warehouse loomed vast and echoing, beams crisscrossing the rafters like skeletal fingers, dust motes dancing in shafts of light, piercing broken windows. Voices drifted from the central chamber, gruff tones haggling over routes and payoffs, the clink of bottles underscoring their cynicism. Ethan's heart pounded a measured beat, the bracelet on his wrist, a tactile anchor as they slipped through a side door, shadows cloaking their advance. Hidden behind stacked crates reeking of mildew and old oil, they watched, a dozen figures in nondescript jackets, led by a wiry man with a salt-streaked beard. Victor Kane, the Vale's architect, his face etched with the hollowness of compromised souls. Maps sprawled on a makeshift table, marked with drop points like Devil's Drop, logs detailing scrubbed reports and staged wrecks. "The girl's mom got too close. Saw the convoy run off-road," Kane said, his voice a low drawl laced with indifference. "Clean-up was clean. No loose ends." Mia's breath hitched over the radio, topside with the others, but Ethan's resolve steeled. This was the fracture point where corruption met its mirror. They moved like whispers, Jax planting a tiny recorder in the rafters, while Lena snapped photos with a concealed camera, the shutters click masked by the group's laughter. Evidence piled. Audio of admissions, visuals of bribes changing hands, envelopes thick with the currency of neglect. But tension coiled as a lookout stirred, his boots scuffing the floor. Ethan signaled retreat, the trio edging back, hearts thundering in the stifling air. Kane's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "We got company!" The chamber erupted in motion, shadows lunging toward the door. Ethan shoved Lena clear, Jax covering with a flash grenade from his kit, not lethal, just disorienting light that bloomed like a desert bloom. Buying seconds, they burst into the sunlight, sprinting for the ridge as shouts echoed behind. Engines revving in pursuit from the warehouse lot, 3 trucks peeling out, dust plumes rising like accusations. The oath mobilized, bikes roaring to life in a symphony of defiance, forming a rolling barrier as Ethan scooped Mia onto his saddle. The chase ignited, tires screaming over gravel, the river flashing silver to their left. Wind lashed faces, carrying the acrid sting of exhaust and fear sweat. But the pack held formation, flanking maneuvers drawing fire wide, bullets pinging harmlessly off rocks rather than flesh. Ethan's mind raced. No vengeance, only exposure. He keyed the radio to Riley. Upload it all, now, to every contact, every honest ear. Miles unfurled in a blur of adrenaline. The trucks faltering as the convoy veered into twisting arroyos, the oath's knowledge of the terrain a shield forged from years of shadowed rides. By late afternoon, the pursuers broke off, vanishing into the haze, cowed by the growing static on their own radios, Riley's broadcast rippling outward like a stone in still water. News fragments crackled back, alerts to distant allies. Tips flooding lines that corruption couldn't bury. Kane's network cracked, badges turning inward under the weight of recorded truths, investigations igniting from the fringes inward. As dusk settled, soft and forgiving, the convoy halted at a high overlook, the Badlands sprawling below in twilight's embrace. Engines ticked cool, the air cooling to a balm, scented with wildflowers stirred by evening breeze. Mia dismounted, her face alight with a quiet victory, the sign from Route 17 now tucked away like a relic. Ethan pulled the letter from his saddlebag at last, unfolding it fully in the fading light. His sister's words washed over him, forgiveness offered, a plea to meet her son, to weave the family Tommy had dreamed. Tears pricked his eyes, unashamed. Promises, once dormant, now breathed. He dialed the number scrawled at the bottom, voice steady. I'm coming home. For all of us. The crew gathered, Jax clapping his shoulder, Lena enveloping Mia in a hug that spoke of chosen bonds. Riley's voice over the radio confirmed, arrests rolling in, the veil unraveling under its own weight. No glory in the takedown, just justice, poetic and unyielding, the system's rot exposed by those who'd long been its outcasts. Mia looked up at Ethan, bracelet glinting on his wrist. We found home, she said, the words a vow sealed in the desert's hush. The iron oath stood as one, silhouetted against the stars, guardians of the overlooked, their loyalty a legacy etched in miles and honor. As the moon rose, engines fired anew, carrying them toward new horizons. Reunions awaited, wounds mending in the rhythm of the road. Redemption rode with them, silent and profound, a promise kept against the world's indifferent tide. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. These stories of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds mean the world. If it touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join the family. We'll see you on the next road.